Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May 8th Downtown Parking Committee meeting. Can I have the roll call, please?
Committee Member Pratt.
Here.
Committee Member Stahl.
Here.
Vice Chair Newkirk.
Here.
Chair Pinner.
Here.
Committee Members Labrie and Zarate are absent. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Hold on, flip the page. Okay. Are there any requested changes to the agenda?
No changes at this time, Chair Pinner.
Okay. At this time, we'll open
Not
up
yet.
public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public who wishes to comment on anything in the jurisdiction of the Downtown Parking Committee, but not on today's agenda. Do we have any requests to speak?
We have Kay Maury and Katie from Santa Barbara Investment Company for electronic public comments distributed during the meeting. No in-person or online speakers requested.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll close public comment. And to note, everyone has a copy of those things that have been handed out to you for those public comment. All right, any announcements, staff?
Thank you, Chair Pinner. I'd like to share first an appreciation for all of our downtown stakeholders for their patience. It's been a busy season for construction and repair in our lots. We have just completed Lot 5, the Victoria lot. That was actually restriped on Monday. And much appreciation. I'm looking at Roy Forney over there and all of our team for the support and coordination. Public Works team was able to do an amazing job on that lot that long needed repavement. Check it out, looks great. Also some significant sidewalk work was done. Lot 12, there was a remediation project that was handled by Sustainability and Resilience that came to completion just this past weekend. So that lot is fully back open. That was a partial closure that went on for just shy of a month. I want to really appreciate all of the stakeholders for their patience down at Lot 12. And right now, both the Lot 7, which is the library lot, and Lot 9, the Lobero lot, are having concrete work. This helps extend the lifespan of the concrete parking structure and helps with being able to effectively shed and drain water from rain events without negatively impacting the structure. Those projects are both winding up this month, but again, we want to appreciate all the downtown stakeholders' patience, especially in the library. That lot actually has both the top floor, the roof, and the level C, one below, are currently being worked on. So what that means is that for people who are coming downtown to try to park in that lot is often full, and we have signage and we're encouraging people to park in the Granada Garage, Lot 6, or in other lots around the area. So pardon our dust, important work to preserve the lifespan of our parking system. I'd also like to share announcements as part of the downtown parking system, especially in Lot 13, the Amtrak lot, and in Lot 9, we have spaces that we rent. Just so it turns up, it is the season of some turnover, and I'd like to share that we are currently leasing and advertising the REA building, the space that was formerly Wheel Fun Rentals, previously Open Air Bicycles. That space is actively for lease. Similarly, we're actively leasing 920 and 918 State. Those were the retail spaces that are adjacent the Film Center, which we are very excited, and I'll look over to Committee Member Sean Pratt for all the work that is being done. Really significant improvements to the Film Center in our Lot 9 facility. So that's going to be such a special project for downtown. So anyway, I think that's it for announcements.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 10th, 2025. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
We have a first from Mr. Newkirk. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Mr. Pratt, any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Great, thank you. I had a quick question just back on announcements on the construction. And if we could reflect for the minutes that Mr. Labrie has joined us at the approval of the minutes, but wasn't able to vote. Or we can revote, but that's okay. All right. I'm assuming when we have these changes and we do something when we note, so when we get the occupancy reports, we'll note that obviously some of these lots will look a little funky for a week or two, so just when that comes back, make sure we recognize that. Some lots all of a sudden will be more for, I don't know if it even, it'd be interesting to see if it shows up as a bump. I guess we'll see how it happens. All right, on to item number 2.
Thank you, Chair Penner. I'd like to welcome Ethan Pitney, our Parking Resource Specialist and keeper of all things PBIA, to present to us on the Parking Business Improvement Area Assessment Report.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning, committee members. My name is Ethan, and I will be providing an update on the Parking and Business Improvement Area Annual Assessment Report for fiscal year 2026. So for those who may be unfamiliar, the Downtown Parking Committee is the advisory committee to the City Council on the Parking and Business Improvement Area, or PBIA for short. So this is an item that we bring to the committee each year to get a recommendation before going to council, where they will declare their intent to levy and hold a public hearing before fixing and assessing the rates for the upcoming fiscal year. The staff recommendation is a status quo assessment for fiscal year 26, and that kind of stays in line with our 2-year budget outlook plan of minor changes for this fiscal year, with an opportunity to reevaluate and potentially make bigger changes in fiscal year 2027. Did not move the slide. Sorry, there's the recommendation there written out. So a little background. The downtown parking system, as directed by the city circulation element, as one of its main goals is to increase the available public parking for downtown customers, clients. And in 1970, the Parking and Business Improvement Area was established, and it's an agreement between the downtown business community and the city of Santa Barbara. Around that time, a courtesy period was also established, originally 90-minute courtesy period to help businesses stay competitive in the downtown core with other nearby shopping centers. And the idea was that the PBIA assessment would allow businesses to help fund to offset the loss in revenue from that courtesy period. So you can kind of think of it as an aggregate merchant validation system for the businesses downtown. And here's a look at the current boundaries of the PBIA. So currently it's over 50 blocks, it encompasses over 50 blocks. It started out in 1970, a little less than half that size. So it was bound by De La Vina Street to the west and Santa Barbara Street to the east. The northern boundary is Sola Street, and it went down to De La Guerra Street to the south. In 1991, the south boundary was extended to the 101 freeway to sort of reflect the addition of the 3 new lots, so lot 10, 11, and 12. And then there was another expansion in 1999 that expanded the southern boundary down to Cabrillo Boulevard to include lot 13, or the train depot lot down there. So it's an ongoing 55-year partnership, and since its inception in 1970, we've added 4 lots to our parking system. So we're currently at 5 parking garages and 8 surface lots, which account for over 3,200 public parking spaces. To give an idea on the amount of people that we're serving, customers that we're serving, for fiscal year 2025, we're expecting a little over 3 million transactions, and about 2 million of those will be non-pay transactions, so vehicles that entered and exited the lot within that 75-minute courtesy period. Okay, moving on to the assessment of the businesses in the PBIA. So the billing is currently handled by our finance department, and they work with a consulting company to actually, send out those self-assessments, because it is self-assessed. The businesses report their revenue, and then they send payment either quarterly or annually. I'll get into that a little bit later. So that first assessment factor is the business rate, and then the second assessment factor is the zone of benefit, so essentially how close the business is to the nearest public parking lot or where it sits within the public parking system. So that percentage is determined based on the benefit they receive from the public parking that we provide. And then the third factor is the patron parking credit. That is also a percentage. It's basically a discount that a business will receive if they offer parking for their customers. There's a calculation that goes into that. Not many businesses that pay into PBIA receive that credit. Okay, so here's a look at the business categories and rates. So this has been unchanged since fiscal year 2011. That was the last time there was an addendum to the engineer's report. So you can see, categories 1A through 1E, they are assessed based on gross sales, and their assessment rate is determined based on their average sale. So as their average sale increases, you can see the rate actually adjusts down. And then we got the categories 2 through 7 are assessed either on square footage or by the number of professionals working in that establishment. Those ones, so all of them are assessed quarterly, but the categories 2 through 7, they have the option to pay annually if they opt for that. The next factor is the zone of benefit percentage. So if a business shares a block with a public parking lot, it is automatically determined to be in a 100% zone of benefit. You can see on the right there we have a breakdown of how the businesses, what zone of benefit percentage they are. So there's 858 roughly total businesses that are assessed and pay into the PBIA. And you can see over 60, almost 70% of those are within a 100% zone of benefit. If you do not share a block with a public parking lot, then you're automatically, the highest zone of benefit you can have is 40%. And this is all predetermined in the engineer's report. It's laid out by parcel, and the zone of benefit percentage is determined there. So if there's a change in tenancy, that percentage wouldn't change. And then the third factor is the patron parking credit. You can see on the right, a very large majority of businesses downtown do not get a patron parking credit in their assessment. But there are a few that do, and the maximum benefit that a business can receive is 75%. There are some requirements. The space must be for customers of their business, and it must be within 250 feet of the business to qualify. And there are certain things that do not qualify as parking, so alleyways, mechanical rooms, etc. Those would not qualify you for the patron parking credit. Now we'll look at an example of an assessment. This is put in very simple terms here. So we have a retail store with $800,000 in Q1 sales with an average sale of over $100. Their business rate based on that rate sheet would be $12.80 for the quarter. And we assume that they do not share, they're not on the same block as a public parking lot, so their zone of benefit would be 40% in this case. And then let's say they have one parking space for their customers, and it's a 2,000 square foot establishment. It comes down to there's a parking requirement, and it's one space per every 500 square feet, I believe, for the downtown core. That may have changed, but just for the purpose of providing an example, we're going to assume that their patron parking credit is 25%. So you can see how that plays into the calculation down there. So you'd have the business rate, and then you multiply by those two factors. And then just to clarify, the patron parking credit, that's 25% off of their assessment. So then you would multiply it by a factor of 75% in the actual equation. So there are a number of non-assessed entities in the downtown core. So those are things like government agencies, live theaters, nonprofits, charitable organizations, and then businesses with considered to be less than 20% zone of benefit. Not very many of those, but there are a pretty large amount of non-assessed entities downtown that do not pay into PBIA currently. And this chart here shows our PBIA revenues over the last 7 or 8 fiscal years. And then also the expenses that are in that same program. So the 4317 program, these are the expenses that PBIA revenues are eligible to fund. So hourly salaries and utilities are what the funds are limited to. And you can see over time, our expenses have gone up quite a bit, and PBIA revenue has been relatively stagnant. It did dip there because of COVID. And then for fiscal year 24, we started using that third-party consultant. And since then, we have made improvements on collections and businesses getting familiar with the process. So that's kind of explains that uptick from FY 24 to 25. And then for fiscal year 26, we're maintaining the status quo revenue projection of $1 million for that fiscal year. And then here's a look at historical PBI revenue versus the cost of the courtesy period. So in other words, the revenue that is lost by providing that courtesy period. You can see it's the cost of the courtesy period has outpaced PBI revenue for some time now. The original intent was to offset the cost of that courtesy period. And I had trouble going back farther than 1993 data. Just gets a little spotty, but you can see it was quite a bit closer back then. PBI revenue has just about doubled since 93. So 93 it was just under 500,000. And then, for the last 10 or so years, it's been around $1 million per fiscal year. And you can see we've had several rate increases since then. So, back in the 90s, it was $1 per hour. And now with the 2 recent rate increases, we're up to $3 per hour, which kind of explains why the value of that courtesy period has gone up so much. That's correct. Yeah, this is an estimate based on, because it's hard to account for behavior, but basically an estimate of the revenue that we would receive if we did not have a free period, if we were charging from the start. Okay, and then here's the roadmap for fiscal year 2026. So we'd like to receive a recommendation from the committee today before bringing the report to City Council. It has been submitted already for the June 3rd meeting, which will be where Council declares its intent to levy the assessments. And then we will have a second City Council, we will go to City Council a second time on June 17th, 2 weeks later, for the public hearing, where the public can raise their concerns, and the City Council can assess those concerns and then fix and levy the assessments for fiscal year 2026. And then the assessment will go into effect July 1st of 2025. So just a quick recap, our fiscal year 26 proposal, there are no proposed changes to the benefit zones, the rate sheets, or the basis for levying the assessments. With a projected revenue of $1 million for FY26, that would account for a little over 9% of our FY26 total revenue, and almost 10% of our FY26 operating expenses. So just to clarify, that excludes capital expenses. And looking at fiscal year 27 and beyond, part of the reason we're recommending a status quo assessment is there's a lot of changes going on. There's restructuring within the department, so we kind of want to assess that in fiscal year 26 before looking at potentially making some changes to the PBIA. If we wanted to adjust PBIA rates, it would require an addendum to the engineer's report, and based on what I've heard from finance, that would be a 6 to 9 month lead time. If we wanted to make that decision for FY27, we'd have to get the ball rolling pretty soon into FY26. And then another thing I know that has been brought up in the past is including some of those non-assessed entities. So that would be the time that you would want to do that as well. So those are just some of the basics if we did want to go that route. And then now time for committee discussion. I'd like to receive a recommendation and then also answer any questions or take any other input you guys have.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report. Questions from the committee? Yes, Mr.
Chair,
Newkirk.
Chair Pinner,
Yeah.
excuse me. Before we begin committee discussion, I believe at this point, Committee Member Pratt may need to recuse himself from the discussion. So we'll confirm with the city attorney, but I think to be safe for today, if you're all right with that, Committee Member Pratt should refrain on voting on this item.
Sorry you have to leave, but don't go far. We need you back. There's another item after this, so you're gonna have to, you have to step out of the room for this time. Nope, yeah.
I guess I'll take a break here.
Take a break, sorry. Thank you.
Let me know when I'm not here.
We'll get you. All right, thank you for that, appreciate that. And to note, we still remain with a quorum, so we're all good there. Okay, sorry, Mr. Newkirk.
Yeah, thanks. So on the issue of an addendum to the report to reflect rising operational costs, does that include simply doing a inflationary adjustment tied to CPI?
Vice Chair Newkirk, through the chair, I believe that, actually, I spoke with finance and they said that it would require an addendum to the engineer's report. So essentially, the benefits that all the types of businesses receive would have to be reassessed as a part of that. So,
So anytime we wanted to change this, even for inflation, every single time, we'd have to take a year, like a 6 to 9 month process, to simply like
that's,
because like the 2010 addendum includes a recommendation to establish a city policy on inflation. And so like certainly the 2010 report assumes that wouldn't need a change to the report.
right. I did see that. I wasn't able to confirm that when that was approved, that option was also approved. I wasn't able to confirm that, so I believe a reassessment would need to be done. That's my understanding.
Vice Chair Newkirk.
Go ahead,
through
Mr.
the Chair. I'd just like to reiterate to Mr. Bitney's point. I believe adding since we have not had an inflation adjustment, to add that factor would require a process that would take some lead time for staff. Probably, if that was established ongoing, that would not have to be done every year. I'm projecting that. But once that policy was established, that could probably be able to adjust in an ongoing way. But just simply to add that, since that hasn't been a factor, which is why I think the delta between the income brought in from the PBIA and the services that previously supported has grown over the years, making that first change would be significant. And I think we all are projecting that we would want to make bigger changes in the next cycle. So unfortunately, just for the legality of it, it would require a fair amount of process in this iteration.
Okay, that's it. I'll have a comment, but that's it for the question.
Any other questions of staff?
I have a question on Mr. Newkirk's question, and then comment when it becomes the right time. But I think, Mr. Pitney, what you're suggesting and what staff is suggesting is that the costs of operating have outpaced inflation because the nature of the calculation takes into account inflation because it's percentages, and presumably income rises and falls and productivity rises and falls. So the calculation, extracts percentages of what the business activity is generating.
Committee Member Labrie, through Chair Pinner. So if we look at the rate sheet here, you are correct on the sales, on the businesses that are assessed based on sales. The one thing to consider, though, is that the category that they are in would shift. If inflation is bringing up, total sales for a business, then they may also move down in category. So if you see, if their average sales is less than $20, say, and then it inflation bumped that up over the $20, then they would be moved down to that 1B category. And then their rate would be, basically cut in half there. So that it makes sense. You would think that, but if that would only be the case if the business weren't switching categories essentially, and then all of the businesses assessed based on square footage or by professional, those you would assume would remain unchanged without like a structural change to the business.
I have a question to ask. If getting into engineers' reports, and it's a question of staff, since State Street is closed, would it be necessary to redo the engineers' report to understand zone of benefits and all that stuff with a different configuration than when the report was done?
Yeah, Chair Pinner, that's an excellent question. Thank you. And that is one of the main reasons we sort of put that effort to reevaluate the PBIA that we had begun prior to the pandemic on hold, just because part of that engineer's report is determining just how far people walk and determining what that zone of benefit is from a parking lot. And with the current configuration of State Street being still in a temporary condition, it's difficult to make that assessment in a sort of long-term way because people's behavior may be different. It's still something we could undertake, but the basis of the basis of that assessment might change as shifts happen to that configuration of State Street.
Sorry, and a follow-up to that would be, looking at the categories and rates is probably another big issue that an engineer's report is. And as you say, we were anticipating to do this pre-pandemic and sort of got sidetracked, but I'll just leave it at the history moment for now.
Yes, and
Okay.
that is, we certainly understand the need to sort of reevaluate the PBIA, the current structure of the PBIA, whether this continues to be the best way to fund parking downtown and to have that sort of shared partnership that we have with our businesses downtown, or whether there might be something that is more efficient, both to administer and for the businesses. And so that's something we do intend to undertake, and we'll get a little bit more into it in our discussion of the budget. But last week we discussed those sort of phase one changes to our operations, and phase two, this would be an important part of that analysis.
Okay, good. If there's no more questions, I'll open up for public comment. Is there any public comment?
Chair Pinner, there's no speakers for public comment.
None. Okay. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for comments and hopefully move to a recommendation. So, Mr. Newkirk.
Yeah, Mr. Pitney sort of stole my math thunder, but I do want to reemphasize this because we brought this up briefly last year, and so now this is a couple years. I think even last year before we looked at like the legality, it was like, oh, we're talking about 3%, and we were proposing huge structural changes to our parking rates, and so it was like 3% on the PBIA assessment was going to be like kind of marginal difference, and we're already proposing all these other things. So we kind of didn't do it then, and we're not going to do it now. I understand that. But I hope that short of doing a new engineer's report, we can get a policy in place for annual adjustments. And as Mr. Pitney noted, kind of summarized, really the only categories that accurately adjust for inflation are 1C, 1D, and 1E. Everything else, we're not capturing that increased cost. Like these rates are from 2010. So if you think like we have to adjust that $20 and $100 threshold every year as well. That $20 threshold in 2010, what's that now? 35. So anything with an average sale of 20 to 35 is now getting into that 1B and is paying half as much. So we're really, it's pretty obvious why the PBIA assessment is not covering what it was intended to do, is because we've just been super static on what our rates are. So I just hope, I know we're not going to ever go back with this structure and actually like change the threshold next year to 35 or 38, whatever it is, but at least we don't keep digging a deeper hole moving forward. So that's my spiel on that.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. Other comments from the committee? I have a few. Okay, a couple of things I would want to touch on. Obviously, I think, following up on Mr. Newkirk, the static nature of the report has been frustrating, or the plan. I don't know what's the best way to call it. And I do note, everyone does know that it wasn't our goal to change this or work this through during pre-COVID, and we got sidetracked. And as you mentioned, we were proposing a lot of changes last year, so it was like, how many changes do you propose in 1 year? We sort of put it off, but I really want to follow up emphasizing the need for a revisit, and I don't know if it's actually, I don't think it's part of the recommendation, but I almost want to somehow make it clear that the committee is requesting that a new assessment PBI report be done next year. I don't know if it can be like a two-part, where if we're to that point, and we're accepting to move forward this, but we were really hoping that council will and the committee will move forward on a new look-see on this. I'd like to see that. I think as every year I've been on this committee, I've said that I think the issue of like live theaters, nonprofits, those exempt organizations should not be exempt. I think we put it in our statement almost every year. I don't see a reason why they should not be paying for the use of the parking structures or into the PBIA. That's my opinion. And I think that's it for right now for me. Anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff and possibly those in the audience, but how do we get this done? Like to Chair Pinner's point, we made this recommendation year after year after year after year. So what really drives this to do? I think the committee wants to support whatever the process is to get it seriously considered. And so the question is, I guess, to staff. Process, and then, maybe a little bit more political question of, what is the process in addition to the process look like?
Committee Member Labrie through the chair. So the process is again what we began before the pandemic. So we have to hire a consultant who can generate an engineer's report. So they have to be able to have the engineer sign off on it, and then it would need to go to council to be adopted for the new assessment. So. There's some more details in there, but I'm not super well versed on those, so I'd have to get back to you on that. But where we got with the consultant that began prior to the pandemic was to sort of an evaluation of what made the most sense for the parking system moving forward in terms of covering this cost and of truing up our revenues and expenditures. And the consultant's initial recommendation was actually that the city replace the PBIA with something else that is easier to administer and that is more straightforward. And so, that's really the evaluation that would need to be done at this point is, almost less so, what does this chart in front of us look like, and more so, do we want to continue to have this, or do we want to do something different in order to fund our parking system? And so I think that's the question that we have to answer next.
Mr. Chair, follow up, when that recommendation was made by the last consultant, what did we do with it? Did it go to council? Did council weigh in on that recommendation? Was it informal?
So it came in the form of a memo in May of 2020, and so at that point, that was sort of the last thing that we did on this project before putting it on hold for the pandemic. And so that didn't go anywhere from there, but that is going to go into our sort of phase 2 considerations that we're going to be entering into this coming year for our FY27 budget.
So I'm not sure if it would be appropriate, but since it sounds to me like what you said is it did not go to council.
Correct.
And I think if it's appropriate, it should accompany this year's recommendation by the parking committee that I don't see why council shouldn't start chewing on this idea sooner rather than later, since it's already, 3 years late, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Bree. Any other comments? Okay, yeah. Oh, yes, we do have a, no, yes, but Mr. Rouse, Mayor Rouse.
We are on TV, by the way.
Yes. Are you gonna need to come to the, because we're, sorry. We've now become. Most people don't like meetings. Yeah, well, things have changed. We love it.
Okay, so Mr. Chair and committee, yes, this is something we've talked about a whole bunch, and we talked about the live performance theaters and all those things. What happened in 2020 was a sea change downtown. And what I'm hoping is about to happen, per the DSBIA and all the different things that are going on, is another sea change. So it's a really, I would personally rather see us not spend a ton of time and money on an engineering report now, and it's particularly in the staff recommendations on what we're going to do with some rates, the mix between residents and businesses. It's a whole new system. So I'd almost like to see us, it's frustrating to talk about it year after year, but take a pause before dishing it up to council for some kind of invention, particularly when it comes to how we're going to assess the businesses. A lot of these the property owners are being assessed like they never have before in the DSBIA. So anything you put forward as a change now is going to get more blowback than before. And I would just kind of suggest kind of going status quo, at least as far as this goes, until we see what happens. And I think hopefully this year we'll have another sea change as we start moving forward. I know the city administrator is looking forward to, working with the DSBIA to get back open again and see if we can start generating the kind of business and sales tax and the revenues it's going to take to change that whole situation. So that's just my comment. I would be reticent to do something effort-wise in terms of especially engineering expense at this stage of the game.
That's true. While you're
Bree.
still up there, I think you make my point for me, because I believe that the recommendation from that last go-round was, hold on, maybe you don't need to do an engineering report, you need to reevaluate the PBIA, the PBIA as a mechanism. So I think, I'd be curious to know what you.
Well,
think as
no,
well,
and that's just, boy, has that been a discussion we've had for decades and decades? Yeah, you're right, because this is kind of arcane, and we actually changed the whole banking system thing as they were paying a disproportionately high amount. We actually took a hit in PBIA because we changed that. It's probably 20 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, you're right, but I would also see what the profile of downtown looks like given the changes that are, I think, about to happen. And I'm hoping it really does change the profile, because I don't want to continue what we've been doing since 2020, because that's been a nosedive. So I think it's about to turn around. I'd like to think it is. So I'd be hard pressed, especially for the businesses that are looking at the DSBIA assessment now and then having to mess with this. I mean, they're going to call for the elimination of, maybe a simplistic change, but I don't know if the engineer's report is going to be that accurate given how things are changing, mix of business and the residential parking things that we're talking about doing now. Back when this was invented, this was also when the parking system was invented for the businesses as support mechanism, a public-private partnership. I always defended the PBIA's existence because it was a great public-private partnership. Maybe that ship has sailed, and I don't know exactly. So I know if you did an outreach, you wouldn't hear a lot of positives. So I think it's for the committee's sake and for staff's sake, it might be prudent to just kind of to hang on and consider a change in the system. But in terms of trying to set rates and whatnot, I don't know where you'd even start right now, to be honest with you. It's tough. But yeah, we have eliminated, we never charged the live theater, live performance theaters. That's not part of the code. We just have never had the political courage to do it. So that's why. And is it going to be enough bang for the buck to make it make sense? Because they definitely have an impact on our parking. And they would argue that they bring all this business downtown, so it's a positive impact. I don't know. But those are the same arguments we've had for a long time. But yeah, I wouldn't suggest trying to go off in a new effort just yet. I don't know, that'd certainly be staff's recommendation. I don't know what they would recommend, but that's the way I would see it anyway.
Right.
But I wouldn't bring something to council like a big change right now, because there's a lot of things that we're trying to massage at the moment.
Well, thank you, Mayor Rouse. First of all, I appreciate you being here for this meeting, and I appreciate your history here. As you know, you were on this committee for a long time, so you clearly know the history. We really appreciate that. I guess I would just follow up and say, I'm not sure that our goal is I think our goal is to say we're frustrated with the current situation and we'd like to see a change. To Mayor Rouse's point, the timing of that is potentially an issue, and you're bringing that up. But I think I'm hearing a consensus that there's frustration that it is sort of old and it needs something new.
Yeah.
So,
And I might make suggestions when you consider that as a committee that you actually engage the DSBIA, since it's a newly formed body that's really covering pretty much the same district that you guys are covering, and say, what do you guys think? Because you definitely need to want to have those. I'm hoping we have a parking problem again, like we had back in the 90s, where we said we got to build more parking. Well, we haven't got that problem right now. I'd like to have that problem again someday.
that would be okay with us, Tim.
And I do. And one last thing is, I really appreciate the flexibility and how limber the committee and staff have been about looking at the rates for individuals, both long-term and downtown employees. Super positive move right now. So just want to give you guys kudos over that.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Appreciate it. With that, also in interest of time, we probably should try to move to a recommendation.
Chip, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
To Committee Member LaBrie's question of sort of how could we readdress this? I think you alluded to a recommendation for advancing the parking business improvement assessment. It could be as simple as requesting to bring a PBIA strategic discussion back to this committee. As Mr. Pitney alluded to, there's a lead time for changes, but what we're often doing is we're in that cycle of kind of a very tight timeline for approval. So we could actually potentially bring that conversation back in some form, especially as we start to think about these phase 2 changes here at this committee to kind of start to get more specific direction. And that would probably be at the close of this budget cycle as we begin to think into the next. It's just a potential suggestion for the expressions, the feeling of frustration.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
ask
please.
a procedural question. Reading the tea leaves, I think ultimately the city is going to be headed towards, a wholesale re-envisioning of, the benefits and the costs, right, as the downtown community changes. So it's maybe more likely that we would not engage in doing another, engineer's report. So my question is, if the city were to abandon the PBIA for an alternate method of managing downtown's costs and benefits, is there a protracted lead time to get to that decision, or is that as easy as the city council putting it on the agenda and receiving a report and deciding, yes, let's go a different direction?
Committee Member LaBrie, through the chair, the city would need to, so, every year we go and they levy the assessment, and so the council has to vote to do that. So I believe that if we wanted to stop the PBIA, we would both not levy that assessment, and then I believe that there needs to be a vote to disestablish that PBIA, similar to what was just done with the CBID when the previous bid, which was actually established under a PBIA law as well, was disbanded. And so, that would be the mechanics of just ceasing this particular assessment. Moving on to the next thing, it would depend on what the next thing was. If it was a different type of assessment, then, we would have to go through the process of establishing that area, et cetera. If it was an update, obviously, we would do an addendum to the engineer's report or do a new engineer's report. If it's something else entirely, it would depend on what that was. So it could go a number of different ways procedurally.
All right, so if I understand it right now, under this, kind of following the staff report is a recommendation of status quo, no change. And we either have the opportunity to move forward the motion on that, if we're seeing that, or a motion that adds to that, which is some of the things we've talked about. So I'm looking to get there. And I know Mr. Newkirk helps us do that all the time. so.
I'll try. I'm not sure I'll get buy-in on the last part of this, so we'll see. I move that we recommend City Council approve the draft annual report and a status quo assessment for fiscal year 2026 for the PBIA, and that staff return in the next fiscal year for further discussion about next steps for the PBIA, whether it be, what we might be looking in the future on this topic, and finally that we establish a inflationary adjustment policy, if possible, short of an overhaul of the system, that as we move forward, we have an annual CPI adjustment.
I'm going to paraphrase slightly. Accept the report, ask staff to come back with recommendations to modify the PBI for 2027, and add an inflationary, request a inflationary adjustment policy to the PBIA.
To clarify the second point, so it's approve the report and the status quo,
Right.
come back with a discussion item about the future of the PBIA, not necessarily a recommendation for change in 2027.
Okay.
I think just as a starting point, have that conversation, and then yes, up a CPI adjustment policy moving forward with the existing structure.
Okay. We have a first, or a motion, excuse me. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second on the motion. First, any conversation or discussion on the motion? Mr. LeBrie?
Not entirely serious, but I actually am thinking at the moment, what about a recommendation to abandon the PBIA now? City can find $1 million to backfill for this next year, and we start the process of reevaluating. No, I am not serious about that, but I am just thinking about the protracted timelines to make things happen. And I think it's incumbent upon the committee and hopefully the department this time around that we really actively pursue some knowledge so we can impart some recommendations and wisdom to the city council with regard to this. And it's going to take conversations with, the new downtown association and other organizations to kind of corral those ideas. But we play an important part in that. Just like switching to accepting credit cards or any other change that we've made, we have to push it and get going on it. So I'm supportive of the motion this time around. I am also feeling a little rebellious and like we should, we're not making the decision. City council can make the decision not to burden their general fund budget by replacing the PBIA this go round. But hey, let's get something started. So I'm supportive.
Mr. Newkirk?
Yeah, and just to Mr. LeBrie's point there, I didn't go so dramatic on the recommendation, the motion, but you've brought up in the past validation, and at the time I was like, well, that seems really dramatic. Kind of the longer we're going with this in this like convoluted system, I think those things are really worth having like a full agendized discussion about.
And I'm going to ask the motion maker, is there any thought or discussion, including our recommendation for nonprofits and live theaters, the removal of the exempt groups?
Chair, I did not include that intentionally. I wouldn't mind that being part of this future discussion. I'm a little hesitant to recommend that without knowing like what category and like what new cost that would mean. Like which organizations are nonprofits, for instance, how many square feet do they have? And like, are we all of a sudden, like by just putting that in without understanding any of the data, what the financial implications would be for those entities?
Fair enough. Okay, any other comments? If not, we'll move to a vote. Are we all clear on the motion? Do you want to restate the motion for us, or staff?
Can you repeat it?
Because you're not mic'd, I understand that. So we have a motion to move forward the current staff report, a recommendation to come back to the committee with the possible updates or changes or modifications to the,
With a discussion.
With a
on the future of
discussion.
the PBIA.
and to include an inflationary policy program, maybe a CPI or something of that nature. Is that correct? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you all. PBI is always a hot topic. Let's go ahead and get Mr. Pratt back in here. Not Mr. Pratt. Oh, yeah, we got Pitney and Pratt. And then we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. I'd like to share a second pass of the budget review. As you may recall from our last meeting, we went over sort of the underpinnings of our FY26 budget proposal, but we did not actually go over the revenue and expense in detail. Similarly, we brought up the fee schedule, but in the interest of time, we tabled that agenda item. So those would be the next two agenda items. In the spirit of time, I'll move through pretty quickly, both because this committee has already received this information, it's been presented to the Finance Committee, and most recently, actually just this week, presented at City Council with the first pass of the overall City Administrator's recommended budget. So thank you. My apologies, and I'll bring it. I'll bring up the presentation here as a visual aid. Whoa. One moment. Apologies. Thank you. All right. So let's start off. So our recommendations are, two large parts. Most significantly, there's a creation of a downtown services fund. Creation of a downtown services fund for all of the non-parking expenses. This is quite significant and really aligns with the previous general funds we received this year. So call it a spade. The maintenance of the promenade being a general fund expense and actually being pulled outside of the downtown parking fund. We're also in discussions to contract with the DSBIA for promenade maintenance. So that's an ongoing contract that we're structuring for this next year. And again, what we're going to present to you for our revenue and expense is the downtown parking fund revenue and expense. So you can think of the significant portion of that expenses being taken out. Similarly, we're going to pause capital spending. So just like we're doing now in lots 7 and 9, which is a concrete maintenance work to extend the life of that structure, or the paving in lot 5, we're not going to do those projects in FY26. We're also not going to upgrade elevators. We're going to pause and invest in a facilities assessment like we've done in the past. But it's really important to bring up to date in terms of an engineer's report as to the state of and the cost to bring to proper state of repair for all of our parking facilities. That'll help us for capital planning into the future. And a sort of status quo tune-up. Without making major changes, how can we tweak the system to meet our budgetary goals and also to meet our responsibilities to our constituencies? We have the goal, and we really lead with how can we further discount employee parking, and ultimately how can we bring down the cost of parking for everyone? So we want to discount employee parking with a pilot in the Ortega Garage. We want to lower the cost of the 24/7 permit, which is really designed for residents, especially for downtown residents that may have very challenging on-street parking issues. And we want to drop the cost and enhance the locals weekender permit. This is just for Santa Barbara County residents. And it's a really compelling $80, bring down to $80 for a 6-month of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday downtown, effective in all of the lots. We want to move ultimately to a pay-by-plate, but initially a pay-and-display system in the Helena lot, which was actually initially proposed some years ago. We want to kind of execute on that. And we want to limit the courtesy period misuse, which we had an extensive discussion, and thank you so much for engaging that. We're really leaning towards one courtesy period per lot. For folks in the downtown to sort of use that dimmer switch to not negatively impact people frequenting the downtown, but just to avoid misuse. And then we want to streamline on-street timed parking so that it's clear and predictable for people parking downtown what the time restriction is, if they're on the 0 block, if they're on the 100 block. Also, that makes it a lot easier for our limited police department parking enforcement officers' capacity. In all, these changes, so we are proposing a rough increase of about $445,000 in revenue, reducing the capital expenditures, and then, of course, the creation of the Downtown Services Fund, which is to the tune of about $1.75 million. In all, this gets us to almost a balanced budget, at just in the red at $55,000. And we're going to go over the full sort of standard downtown parking committee revenue and expense worksheet that we typically go through each year. Again, for that capital spending, you see what we are spending funding on, which is that facilities assessment, access control, which we do every year just to maintain our system, and the facility maintenance annual repair. These are the miscellaneous. This is the must-haves to kind of keep our system going, but we'll defer concrete maintenance, elevator, the Amtrak building roof, signage, trellis repair, et cetera. But then we do hope to bring back more capital that will be needed in FY27. All right, let's get to our I hope this all is a comfortable, the classic format of our budget. So let's look at revenue. It's also, you have the full worksheet on the back of your packet. So as you see, hourly revenue is our most significant income source, and our proposed budget helps boost that very modestly with the tweaks that I went over. So we basically forego some income with some of the discounts, and we sort of tighten up the system to bring in a very modest revenue increase. Our monthly parking is more or less static. These are the permits in lots that can support permits. The assessment, as we just went over for the PBIA, is fairly static. What you will notice is, in this case, we're just talking about the downtown parking fund. So the downtown services program would incur some of those expenses and actually some of this revenue. So you're seeing less pass-through, and you also won't see outdoor business facility or the parklets that are on State Street, that income transfers over to that downtown services program. Our rents are historically down from what they were, but that is stepping back up. And again, we're getting into the miscellany of the sort of self-supporting residential permits and then pass-through programs like the crossing guard revenue, which is the school districts contributing to our shared partnership for crossing guards.
Can I ask you
Chair
just a
Pinner.
question while we're on that topic? Is the ambassador program part of that pass-through? Or is that a separate line item?
Chair Pinner, the ambassador program, because that is not parking related, that's actually going to be, it was previously a pass-through. Now that's going to be done in that downtown services program that'll be general funded.
Okay, thank you.
In all, for the fund, revenue will be $10,879,000. We'll shift to expense. We have our permanent salaries and benefits. This is staff across maintenance, operations, and also programs that we have some salary savings for held positions. Thank you. Apologies. Our allocated costs. These are the costs. One city. We have a lot of support from IT, from finance, from various city operations that are assessed. These are the allocated costs. As we're all facing, there are and of course self-insurance. Those allocated costs have steadily increased, and they're assessed for FY26. Which you'll notice, plaza support and maintenance is off our books for the downtown parking fund. Supplies and services, modest. Utilities has been a steady increase as we've all faced at homes and in our own business life. And again, you see otherwise fairly standard. You do see the Downtown Ambassador Program there off the books as well as the crossing guards here. In all, holding those expenses and with those modest adjustments, after the modest capital expense of $640,000, we get to a fund net again of just negative $55,000 for FY26. So ultimately, we're just sort of holding the line at our reserve level, which is below reserve requirements, but we're effectively working to stabilize the fund for FY26 and give us a platform to think about what changes we might want to make into the future, but at least with a program that is able to at least cover its expenses. And with that, I'll offer up for questions.
Great, thank you. I just have one question on the positive capital spending. And this goes to access control, equipment, et cetera. I mean, I know we have an expense for every year, but my recollection is we were talking at some time of a big possible change, and I don't see that in the FY 2027. So just thoughts on that.
Chair Pinner, great question. Indeed, the parking access and revenue control was slated on our capital budget for FY25 to a significant degree. I think it's $1.5 million. Our parking revenue control is both a significant system that we rely on, as we experienced just on Tuesday with power outages. You quickly realize any outage in our system can be very challenging. Just operationally, let alone for revenue recovery. We have actually, that was funded by Measure C. Measure C has experienced a tightening as there are competing needs for that funding, and there was a somewhat oversubscribed. As a result, some of that funding has been transferred, and we have a remaining balance of about $300,000. We're also looking at what we can bring to this committee that might streamline those expenses. And really, there's such a significant change right now in the revenue control world and access control world in parking because of technological changes. So we will be bringing these back to you, and we do have some of those encumbered funds, but those encumbered funds would not be on the capital expense books for FY26. Sorry, it's a long
Yeah, it's
answer to
not
your question.
26, yeah, I'm just looking, because you have a 2027 line of future, and I'm not seeing it there either, so just making sure that it's not, there's a potential significant need.
Yes, Chair Pinner. So, as Mr. France noted, we had the initial allocation was made for FY25, so that wouldn't show in the out years at this point. As he noted, for a portion of that money was reallocated to other priorities. However, the direction that we've received from the city administrator is that, going forward, she wants us to be coming with funding requests sort of as we need them rather than in advance. This is something that, we've customarily done in the city is, we'll get funding early through the budget process, and then we don't necessarily get to spend it that year, and so it sort of sits on the books. Her direction has been to avoid doing that. So we've been directed to just return with that funding request when we're ready to move forward with a project.
Okay. Mr. Newkirk?
Yeah, on that same slide, is that kind of the situation with because like the last 4 items on the table on slide 5 are just deferred, but they're not in fiscal 27. They're not like, it's not that they're moved to 27, they're just deferred. Is that because we're just going to hold off on budgeting those until we know we're going to do them? Or is that like kind of just putting those on hold for the new facilities assessment?
Vice Chair Newkirk, through the chair, that's a great point, and I want to build off of Sarah Clark's point that with that facilities assessment and with this direction to not sort of try to hold and encumber funds, but instead come with needs as they're clearly articulated, we would bring back whatever needs are expressed in this facilities assessment based on that prioritization. So some of these might drop down as lower priorities, some of these might rise as key priorities to be addressed in FY27.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, first I'm going to open up the item for public comment. Is there any public comment on item 3?
Chair Pinner, no speakers for public comment.
All right, thank you. I'll close public comment. I have one other sort of procedural question. Of the recommendations, we have budget, we have numbers, but we have actions, things that are proposed to be done to the system. Are those decisions, some of those require council, because they're part of either the rate structure or, the daily courtesy period misuse, that's more of just following the rules. I'm just looking for what else, is there any other
Sure.
need to communicate with council how we feel about these things? You've already presented it to them. Has there been any pushback? How are we feeling about these operational changes?
Chair Pinner, I'll start that response. First, that we're going to cover a lot of that recommendation in this next item with the fee schedule, which very much is what the council will then need to approve. And you will see it clearly reflects all of the changes that we're suggesting operationally. And then I will share a general sentiment of, which is expressed in public comment from the mayor. I think there's a fair amount of receptivity to this budget proposal to really stabilize for FY26. So far, we've received general support.
So what you're saying is I'm getting ahead of myself because it's the next item.
No, well, we had the detailed discussion of sort of what those changes are and how they're gonna work operationally. With this committee, we also had a more detailed presentation on those changes to the Council Finance Committee, and they received that positively, as the mayor noted earlier. This past Tuesday, actually just a few days ago, was the initial budget presentation to City Council, in which, again, these issues were highlighted. Obviously, that was a much shorter presentation, couldn't get so much into depth there, but we have briefed other council members on those changes changes. And then there is going to be, I believe, a subsequent presentation of the budget to City Council, although I don't recall off the top of my head what the date or the exact content of that is. But to this point, those changes have been received positively by Council.
Great, thank you. I think this is just a report to us and not any motion, just comments or questions back to staff. And do I see?
Correct.
Do I see any more? Mr. Newkirk's looking at me like it is a motion.
I mean, it's agendized for recommendation.
Okay.
Could I make one comment, and then I'll happy to. I just would flag, like, when you look at the capital spending, fiscal year 2027, it's another $1 million listed here, and then we have the new report assessment that may have a lot more capital expenditures coming our way. So I think there's a big push to support this budget, and I will, but I worry that we're kicking the can quite a bit, and that we swung pretty big last year on our recommendation, and maybe it feels like perhaps an overcorrection, and I kind of worry that in the next couple of years we're going to have some real challenges with our capital, and it seems like capital doesn't just go up with inflation. Those projects, especially right now, are becoming way more expensive, and kind of deferring a lot of stuff is I think worrisome. But with that, I'm happy to move staff's recommended budget to council.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. We have a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. The proverbial can. We like to kick. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our last item of today, which is item number 4. This kind of follows along the same lines, but implements some of these items.
Thank you, Chair Penner. I'm getting better at using the PowerPoint now. So I'll bring to you all the fiscal year 2026 policy updates review with our fee schedule recommended changes. And indeed, we will ask that you make a recommendation that you provide City Council for proposed fee schedule changes for fiscal year FY26. And we're jumping right in. So the fee schedule change, and there's a number of these. So we'll go through one by one. Feel free to ask clarifying questions immediately, if that helps, and then we can discuss as we wrap. So first off, to clarify, as we try to avoid misuse of the 75-minute period, we simply add once per calendar day per vehicle to the description of the first 75 minutes. In the fee schedule, it simply states first 75 minutes and then subsidized. And we're just adding that clarity of once per calendar day per vehicle. This is consistent with our municipal code, just clarifies our fee schedule. The monthly parking in city downtown parking lot number 10, this is our permit. We would propose to decrease this fee from $145 a month to just $70 a month, which is consistent with what the CODA commuter lot was and what CODA commuter legacy permit holders currently pay. We're really excited about this. And I will say, I just want to note, there will be upcoming need for this lot. And like all lots, we manage the number of permits to not exceed the capacity to also support customers. Next, also in the Ortega garage, the restricted monthly parking, this is a discounted amount, but it would be more than what we're offering. So we would simply delete this item. Next, this is a refuse enclosure rental. We actually manage this in partnership with Sustainability and Resilience. Refuse enclosures are an ongoing maintenance challenge. And just to simply kind of keep up with this challenge, want to increase this fee to $65 a month. Next, this is one to sort of honor the legacy of the CODA commuter lot and its next life. We will remove the monthly parking in the city CODA commuter parking lot. Onwards. This is a clarification that will help our staff operationally. In Lot 13, there's the special Amtrak Greyhound passenger rate, or in the city depot lot. And the fee is currently listed as $10 per 24 hours. 24 hours is tricky because when did the clock start? So just to streamline for our operational staff, we want to change this to $10 per calendar day. We work on calendar days. It just makes it much easier for everyone. Next, the flat rate special event entrance fee. We're able to do special fees. These really streamline for large events, especially exits. The minimum and maximum of 3 hasn't kept, especially as we have events that are on a much longer time span. So that's no longer kind of in keeping with our fee schedule. So we want to increase the maximum fee to $20. So if somebody wanted a event that would be closer to all day, that would still be a discount over our daily max. And we generally work with event holders to try to keep those fees very modest, but we want to increase that cap for our special event fees. Next, we want to add Martin Luther King Jr. Day to our holiday schedule, in which we have a reduced schedule. This is what we're talking about for piloting in the Helena lot. A pay and display that could ultimately shift to a pay by plate, again, similar to the waterfront. That fee schedule was already set, but not updated. So we want to update that to have parity with the rest of our system, to be $3 per hour, although a smaller daily max, $20 maximum day, and then a $22 violation fee would not increase. Now, facility user fee. This again, operationally, when we work with folks, as you'll see in like the Creo commuter lot, there's a construction equipment that is staged there. Recently, Tidwell Construction worked with for the Southern California Edison Reliability Project in Lot 8, and we work on facility user fees. This is actually a lot of coordination, and I'll look over to our parking supervisor, Roy Forney, who does an amazing job of supporting the different needs for our downtown that impact our lots. But it's a lot of coordination for us. So just to make that fee more realistic to the time commitment for us, we want to increase that to $200 a day. Again, this is logistics requiring an impact to our lots. Next, the 24/7 permit. Was currently $250 a month. This, while might fit with the sort of the market price for some kind of residential parking for new developments, we want to make this up to $250 a month. This would allow us to have that discounted rate at the Ortega Garage and kind of get to play with what is that right balance for future years as we balance what would a resident want to pay. That also allows us to curb any misuse that would be possible when people can stay over a longer period of time. So up to $250 a month. And the locals weekender, which is really, we're really proud of this, and we want to continue to play with discounts for locals. We want to decrease this to $80 for 6 months. We've also operationally included Friday evenings, and we're going to make that even easier so that folks can come in. Again, this doesn't really conflict with our commuter uses, but people can come in and park in any of the lots if they're a Santa Barbara County resident with this permit Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And then lastly, a discussion that we have at this committee so often is, well, can these folks park on the roof? Can the permit holders, can the legacy discount holders, can we make sure that they're not impacting that sort of ground floor parking for customers? In discussions about this, we realize we don't have a lot of tools at our disposal. and we're not really wanting to take away people's permits because they may have parked in the wrong spot. How can we gently nudge people if that becomes necessary? And so we wanted to add to the fee schedule basically a $15 fee due notice. This would effectively be a pink slip fee for folks who are permit holders that are parked outside of what their agreement says they will park. So it's just a way for us to help people to abide by their permit agreement. And that is all of the fee schedule recommended changes. Open for any further questions or discussion before a potential recommendation.
Great, thank you. Questions? Mr. LaBrie?
Could you remind us, how do you manage the hours that a monthly parking pass is good for? So the difference between a 24/7 permit essentially and a monthly pass.
Thank you, Committee Member LaBrie, through the chair. First, I'll note that a 24/7 permit, if you're thinking about residential parking, you might not be using your vehicle all day. You might leave for the weekend and you're flying somewhere and you're not driving. And so you'll need to leave your vehicle. In our lots, you can only, with a permit or being an hourly parker, you can only stay for, just like the streets, 72 hours. But with a 24/7 permit, you can actually stay for 2 weeks. So let's say you go on a vacation. You can leave your vehicle. It's understood that that vehicle has the right to be there. It's also intended to be more regularly there overnight. So that's the primary benefit, is you have that right to kind of stay longer. There may be some other modest policy differences.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. Yeah, as Ed noted, the 24/7 permit is just that. The intent is to be able to leave the vehicle for longer periods of time and to have the parking lot really be the primary storage location for that vehicle. Whereas the monthly permits are intended to be used for daytime, largely commuter use. However, we recognize the permits themselves are not strictly time restricted. Some people work different shifts. Some people might work a later shift or an earlier shift. And so there's not necessarily set hours. Maybe you go out to dinner and have a few cocktails after work and you don't want to drive home. And so we want to discourage people from driving under the influence. And so, if you're leaving your car occasionally overnight with your permit, it's not a big deal. We really don't track that too closely. But we do, when we close out the parking lots every night, we chalk tires and we note each vehicle that's in there. And that's to make sure we don't have abandoned vehicles. So once you start to accumulate these marks, we know, hey, this car hasn't moved in 3 days. We need to put an abandoned vehicle report in for that. And then that can be towed. We don't do that for our 24/7 permit holders. So before we do that, we can cross-reference with the permit list and say, oh, no, that one's okay to be here. If we do have monthly permits where we're getting that, where we're seeing the vehicle in the parking lot overnight frequently or repeatedly, we do warn that customer. So basically, we note vehicles that are in the lot overnight, and when there's a permit holder, we're able to address that with them. So.
Thank you. One follow-up question. Was there any, for the weekender permit, was there any consideration of weekdays after hours?
Committee Member LaBrie, is a great question. One of the challenges for the discounted permits is how do we not accidentally violate sort of our policy to maintain access and capacity? So I think that's a great question. And like I said, we really want to continue to experiment with discounts for locals in different forms. I will say that I think for the evenings, often in the entertainment zones, so specifically Lot 11 and Lot 5, and then some of those surrounding lots, can be really impacted. This discount allows for all of those lots that typically you can't access by a permit. And so what we don't want to do is basically sell a permit that either is going to impact that lot or is actually not going to be available. That being said, we're absolutely open to suggestions for how we can continue to sort of tinker with discounts that both benefit locals and don't impact access to businesses.
Sorry, follow up on that, just, I think what I heard you say is that you thought about weekdays, but after hours, so, like 5 to close. But which lots are already impacted for those?
So, and this,
Is that on
yeah.
specific days?
So I'll say, and maybe I'll bring Mr. Pitney up, without going too much into the weeds, I would project that the lots, based on, thinking about the occupancy report we received last time, really the entertainment zones, those lots do fill on busy evenings, especially if there's a show in the arts district, or if there's, a special event or a holiday or what have you on the 500 block. So we hadn't explored evenings, but actually I think now that we're sort of having this discussion, I think that's something that we can look more into and discuss further. I wasn't part of the original creation of the Locals Weekender, but again, we're absolutely open to suggestions for what we can explore that is a meaningful benefit to folks. We're dropping the Locals Weekender price because for whatever reason, and this might be advertising related, this might be the price point, this might be the time restriction, it wasn't getting enough buy-in. We weren't selling nearly as many as, say, we sold for the film festival. So we're going to have to continue to tinker with this. The changes that we're making at this point are simply, or that we're recommending, we're open to another change. We would just need to do more research, or simply to allow Fridays and to drop to $80.
Thank you.
Excuse me, any other questions or comments of staff? Yeah, Ms. Stahl.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. I have a question to item 32, why there isn't an increase in the violation fee and what you expect the frequency of enforcement to be, because right now, if you think there's just a 10% chance of enforcement, you might as well not do the $20 pass, if there's only 10% additional cost for if it is enforced.
Committee Member Stahl, that is a great question. We are going to be learning a lot about the Helena lot as we pilot this, which means we probably will have more changes that come through. We actually just met yesterday with the waterfront, which we're seeking to emulate, and the police department, which we'll need to be working in partnership with them. We're discussing we may need, in order to effectively enforce this, a modest change to our municipal code to be consistent with the municipal code for pay and display that the waterfront used. We're going to learn a lot. This is not going to operationally be perfect July 1. It's going to have to go through some iterations. That's a really valuable suggestion, that violation fee is so close to the daily max that people may risk it and may want to change that. I think we really lean towards this because we're transitioning, and some people are currently using that lot as sort of a free all-day lot because of lack of enforcement. We want to nudge people. We don't want to sting people.
Okay, any other comments before I go to public comment? Okay, I'll open up for public comment. Do we have any public speakers on item number 4?
No speakers for public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for a motion and recommendation. Oh, Ms. LeBrue.
I am intrigued, well, so some of these items, it would be nice to be able to tinker with the hours, and wondering if we could make a recommendation that the council approve the rate structure and allow staff the flexibility to tinker with the hours of implementation. It doesn't, it seems to me like that would be a recommendation they might be able to support. Because we wouldn't be changing the fee midstream on somebody, but just when it's applied.
Committee Member Labrie, can I clarify, are you talking specifically about the locals weekender permit or any of the other elements?
Well, I'm thinking mostly of the locals weekender permit. But I'm thinking through the list, I can't think of any others. They don't come to mind that are that time dependent. Are there ones that you're thinking of that
I think at this point, just the locals weekender permit. And I will say the way that we've structured this, and we're always learning, is we actually have had some flexibility for the timing. It's kind of a back of house, a system again that Mr. Pitney has the ski data computer that he can configure basically when that permit is activated for. I would need to get some clarity about how much flexibility that we have, but I think that's a very valuable suggestion to adopt this fee schedule, and you can recommend to staff that we can explore and get back to you what flexibility we have this fiscal year to kind of continue to play with the time that this pass would be in effect.
Just a quick comment to the committee that I think the shoulder hours, those non-peak times are our biggest opportunity and our biggest, market that we want to impact our locals. If we can figure out ways to get locals down to fill the lots during the shoulder hours when we're not impacting already the kind of day, the 9 to 5 business activity, I think that would be a huge win. So it seems like the only piece of this, would be that we can have an impact on is when that weekender permit helps people out to get them down here. So I
can
think
ask-
that should be, we
Yeah.
should really think about how do we get locals downtown?
Let me ask staff a question on this. I think Mr. Labrie is leaning to, the term right now is called a locals weekender permit. If it wanted to become a local weekender and evening permit, is our opportunity to change that only every once a year at the fee schedule? If we wanted to mid-cycle add that to it, what would be the procedure?
Chair Pinner, we would need to do an update to the fee schedule. We're not necessarily limited to only doing that with the budget, although finance does like for most things to go through with the budget. But if we decided mid-year, we discovered that we were able to experiment with that, that's something we could request to have modified.
Thank you. Does that help answer somewhat your question, Mr.
Yeah, well,
Labrie?
I do think that changes to when the off-peak locals permit is used doesn't really have it doesn't have much of a budgetary impact. It's just expanding the benefit, and we wouldn't expand the benefit at the expense of, revenue-generating hours, so. But yes, it clarifies.
I'll make one more comment to your question because I think it's a really valuable one, Committee Member Labrie. One thing that we do that does have a budgetary impact, all of our permits are discounts. So we always like to run the math on what the trade-off for hourly parking versus the use of a given permit would be. And so, like I commented earlier, I was kind of explaining why we didn't do this, but then also thinking out loud, like, that is interesting, but we do need to do research just to know that financial impact in terms of a projection, because as Mr. Forney likes to always point out, those permits are discounts, and that hourly revenue is our most significant revenue source. So I think this is definitely something we want to continue to discuss with you all. I think that we can bring back to this committee to discuss further.
I would just counterbalance that with the financial benefit to downtown's revenue from sales tax and so on, and just all the activity, that what's generated from all that added activity is part of the equation. And that's ultimately at the heart of our mission is, yes, we have to break even, but we're really here to support the business and cultural activities downtown. So,
Yes, Mr. Newkirk.
Yeah, I want to come in. I know we're going long, so I'll be brief and I won't push it, but hopefully something we can talk about in this fee schedule in the future is we have 4 days that we're not operational, and so we're not generating revenue. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Well, it makes sense because we'd be paying staff time and a half, double time, and most businesses are closed. So it's, the volume of activity is going to be low. Easter's different. I think we're kind of giving away a day of revenue because of Easter. The staffing costs won't be different. It's not an observed holiday, and it's a pretty active day in Santa Barbara. So I think that's something we should consider, but I won't push that at this point. But I wanted to flag that.
Thank you. Any other comments, and are we prepared to make a motion? I'm not gonna leave it to Mr. Newkirk again, did he? He's got a full vote. Yes,
I'll do it. Let's get out of
Vice
here.
Chair is our motion maker.
Let's get out of here.
Love
I'll just say I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, and so I'll move staff's recommendation on the fee schedule.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Melissa Bree. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion or recommendation passes. Thank you very much. With that, I think that was our last item on the agenda. Am I correct? And with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it. And thank you, Mayor Rouse, for being here.